when it all comes down to it, we are all human beings. We all have our mouths in the same position. The fact that we have the ability to learn each other's language so that we can talk to each other, this shows us that we are the same species. And there's Indian racists out there that believe that races should not mix. That when races of people, mix with each other, that what they produce is actually harmful to the species of all human races. That sounds like Hitler talking. Yeah, that's racist. And so, can you honestly look at a baby who's half Indian and half black and say to that baby, you're worthless? Yeah, that you are weakening our race. Can you actually say that to a real baby? If you can, you are a racist. And shame on you. Yeah, you are really, really living a sad life, because that's not the way it is, and there's no way you can prove any race is pure on this earth, because humans have been here quite a long time, a lot longer than what most people think. And during that time period, see, there was a time period when the continent was one. There was only one continent, and humans appear in 5 areas. And in time, they meet each other and they do mix, because they realize, that they're the same. I mean, we get attracted to people. It doesn't matter what color the skin is, and people hook up, and next thing you know, they have some kids. Yeah. And you really cannot say there's a pure race. I really don't believe there's such a thing. That's next to impossible. And also, the other thing is skin color is this is a recent development. When humans come on the earth, they're basically the same. And as they meet up and then they separate again and settle into different parts of this earth, wherever they live, their bodies have to adapt to that system, that ecosystem. And some people settled in places that are closer to the sun, so their skin color went dark, their hair texture went different, their eye colors went different. And those that settled in places, that are farther from the sun than others, then their skin color lightened. And then you have people who are like in between. Yeah? And so this is the skin color idea, that all comes, after humans move to different parts of this giant continent. That's where that came from. So nobody was created as a black person or a white person or anything. Nobody was created like that. That's how we developed. So when you're talking about race, that's all superficial. That was what our bodies had to do to adapt to that situation, that location, wherever it was, where our ancestors settled. But that's just the outside. Inside is still the same. Yeah, we all have our noses in the same position, and we all have 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 2 arms and 2 legs, and we have the parts of the body that can connect to others, and enter sacred unions and produce children, and that means we're the same species. Yeah. So no, when you marry somebody who's not your same race, or you hook up with them and have children, you're not weakening the race. You're actually, in my opinion, I'll put it like this: the Métis in Canada have a really good way of looking at this. The Métis are a group of people that were part white and part Indian. Yeah, their fathers in general were, most of them, their fathers were white, and their mothers were Indian, and they were rejected by both sides. They were rejected by Indians, and they were rejected by whites. They faced racism from both sides of their families. So these people decided to, assemble amongst themselves, and they formed their own group. And so they're different tribes. Yeah, some of them are half Cree, some of them are half Lakota, some of them are half Anishinaabe and half Blackfoot. And then the other half is either French or British or Scottish or Irish or something like that. And so these guys all assembled together, and they formed their own group, and now they are recognized as a tribe. They're called Métis, and which I think in French means mixed. And so this group, this Métis group, they have a really cool way of looking at their culture. They say, I'm not half this, I'm not half that. Maybe biologically, but they say, in my mind, I'm both. Yeah, I'm both. I take the best of both worlds. So I'm both. I like that. That's a nice way of looking at it. Yeah, instead of saying you're half this and half that, just say you're both, because you are. Yeah, I like that. I really like that concept. It doesn't make you better. It just means you're both. That's all. That doesn't mean better. It just means different situations. Different does not mean better. It does not mean worse. It just means different. But we're still human. Yeah? We are still human. So what I talk about on this show has to do with this something called a sacred center, and that's what we all have. And this is based on a Lakota Star Knowledge concept of reality beginning within. And this is the basic concept. This is the same concept in which all universes were, are, and will be created by. Yeah, that concept of reality begins within. So when we're looking at that says, that if we want to live a healthy life, we have to start within ourselves first. And then we're able to, do lots of things to live that healthy life, to create that healthy life, and nurture that healthy life. And also, there's some sacred things, some sacred pieces in where our sacred center is. There's some sacred things there, and one of them is a connection to the earth. So when we communicate from there, from that sacred center, that includes taking the time to get to know others, regardless of what color the skin is, because you're going to learn there's good and bad people in all skin colors. Yeah, in all genders, there's good and bad people. And so it's not the skin color that's good or bad, it's how people live. So you take the time to know somebody, and you're communicating from your sacred center to others' sacred centers. Yeah, and when you do this, you're nurturing your connection to the earth. So if the earth ever has a message, you're going to hear it. Yeah, and that's how that is. But when you don't, usually people who don't communicate from their sacred centers, they communicate from their skin color. And that's away from their sacred center. So they'll communicate either from their skin color, or they'll develop a religion and communicate from that perspective, or a political idea or a philosophy. They'll communicate as that, and that is what develops racism. Yeah, and other things too, which I will mention in a few minutes. But this is why it's really important to know these things first. That what communicating outside your sacred center. Yeah, your sacred center. I'll tell you where that is. It's where your physical body, your mind, your emotions, and your soul connect to each other. That's deep within you. There is no language. There is no culture or race or skin color. It's a sacred area where your reality begins. And so to have a healthy life includes taking care of those four parts, coming to peace with your past, so that you learn from it, make the most out of it, and you're able to communicate, receive communication in a healthy way, and enjoy blessings even more than you ever could before. And you're going to learn that difficulties are not a bad thing. They're actually part of a process. And that process, if you learn from it and make the most of it, that turns into blessings like knowledge and wisdom, peace. Yeah, that's what this our ancestral way of life is like. There's no ceremonies involved. There's no religion. There's no sacred items. There's no sacred anything. Because when you live this way that I'm describing, that's the ceremony, and you're the sacred item, and that's all you need. And when we live like that, we find that we don't need a religion, because religions separate people from one another. And people go to war against each other. Look at today, and people. There's something you really have to understand, that I saw a really good article, and I should try to find it again. It asked this question. I think there's 11 questions that it asks, and all 11 questions, their questions are something like, what religion totally subdues women to the point of property, to the point of all kinds of things, like this, really oppression and stuff like that. And what's the biggest religion that did these things? And you know what the answer is? It's Christianity. And they pointed out where it happened and where it's still happening. So for all you people who like to put down Muslims, you be careful about that, because Christians are doing the same thing. It's just that Christians are covert. They're sneaky at it. But Christians have done even worse things than the Muslim extremists are doing today. This is the absolute truth. The Catholic Church, the Protestant churches, they instituted really horrific laws in the past in which millions of innocent people died in one battle. And it's all because of Christianity. Entire nations of people were exterminated under Christianity. In North America, in South America, in other parts of the world. In the name of the Christian God, entire races of people were exterminated. Muslims haven't even gotten that far yet. So before you put down these Muslim extremists, better take a look at your own Christian history. Because the Christians have done far worse than the Muslims have ever done. So these ISIL or ISIS or whatever, these beheadings that they always do, and selling, kidnapping girls and selling them as sex objects and all that kind of thing, yes, that's horrible. But the Christians have done worse. And the Christians are still doing things. But it's covert. It's really sneaky. And they use mind control so that the women don't fight back. That's still happening today. But it's really covert. So you see a Christian family that looks like they're a really nice, happy family. If you really look what's underneath the surface, you're going to see there's some major shit going on underneath. And a lot of it has to do with mind control. So before you start putting down these Muslim extremists for using, what do you call it, brainwashing, Christians have done far worse. And what the Christians have done has long-lasting effects. As I said earlier, many entire nations of people were exterminated at the hands of Christian armies, and they did this in the name of their God. They just like the extremists today, the Muslim extremists today are saying believe in Allah or die, because they're declaring holy war. Christians did the same exact thing, and they're still doing the same thing. It's just that today the Christians are really, really sneaky at it. And that, to me, that makes it worse. If you can do it right out in the public, in a covert way, that's, to me, is really evil. And so the Christians are doing the same thing. Look at all what has been done in North America and South America, with the Catholic Church coming, and the Pope at that time issued this papal bull. It's one of their laws that says that when they come to a new land, if there are inhabitants in that land, and those inhabitants do not believe in the Catholic God, then the Catholic Church has every right to take that land and use it the way God intended it, because only the Catholics know God. And that any inhabitants that are in the way will be exterminated. They will be considered enemies to God, and they will be all exterminated. And that's exactly what the Catholic Church did. They did the same thing that Muslim extremists are doing today. But back then, it wasn't just extremists. This was the Pope, that issued these laws. And the priests most of the priests were behind it. They were supporting it. So they were supporting the Spanish and Portuguese armies in exterminating Indian nations off the face of the earth. They were considering them not even to be human. That gave them, in their minds, the reason to kill them, because in their minds they saw them as animals. So it's still happening, yeah. So, as I said, this happened all over the world. Wherever the churches went outside of Europe, they did these things. They did it in Australia. They did it in Africa. In Ireland. People in Ireland, before the Catholic Church went there, the people in Ireland were very tribal people. In Austria and Germany, very similar. They were very tribal people. And then they developed into this feudal system, and then the church came and wiped all that out. Yeah, so the church has done far more damage. The Catholic and Christian churches have done far more damage than what the Muslims are doing. Now, right now in Germany, there's a movement that there's protests are happening all over. It's about It's against letting immigrants from Muslim nations coming in because there's extremists in these immigrants. And a lot of non-Muslim people are very concerned because if you're letting in millions of immigrants, that's a lot of Muslims coming in. And it's very possible that they could settle in small towns and basically take over the governments using German law. That they'll run for elections and there'll be more of them than the local population. So that would put a lot of Muslims in political power. That's doesn't look too good. So there's a lot of Germans here that are seeing this as an attempt to Islamify Germany. And this is already happening in places like England and France. I didn't think it would come to Germany for quite a while, but it's here because of what's happening in Syria. A lot of Germany is this year. Germany is taking in most of the immigrants, more than England, more than France. So and all these immigrants are Muslim, and there's a lot of extremists in those immigrants. So they can travel back and forth, and they can recruit as well inside Germany. So this is not something that is looking good, and politicians are being real careful about this because if Germany says, okay, you guys can't be here, we're shipping you all out, what does that sound like? Yeah, that sounds like World War II all over again. This time it's not Jews, it's Muslims. But I think it's different though, because here you have to remember, in a lot of the things that have been happening in America, the terrorist events have had their beginnings in Germany, in Hamburg, with some Muslim extremists, and then traveling over to America from Hamburg and setting things up to happen over there, as well as to England, to London, and to have more of those radicals here. That means there's possibility of more attacks happening in America and London and France. So it is kind of a scary situation, but look at what all this is based on, is religion. And none of it has anything to do with the sacred center. It's all based on religion. Yeah, so all millions of people that are in these religions, they're so far away from their sacred centers that they're not even connected to the earth anymore. So I believe that actions like that contribute to the kind of weather we're having. It's not just the oil companies and other mining companies that are contributing to this global warming. I also think it's the way when people are communicating away from their sacred center that they're also influencing that too, because it's all unhealthy energy. So religion is fucking up the weather. Yeah, oil companies and religion are fucking up the weather. Now there's one place where, we're talking about Christians and some of the dastardly deeds they've done, and the effects are still far-reaching. One of the most recent places where they've done this is among Indian people. And the churches do not admit, they don't want to admit they did this. The governments are strongly tied with the churches, even though they say separation of church and state. They still do things based on church law. These institutions refuse to acknowledge what they've done. Because what the governments and churches have in common is duality. And what they've done to people is horrendous. And among Indian people, it was so horrendous that they didn't want to talk about it. It was too hard to talk about. It made you hurt so bad. And so, as a result, it's not in history books. And the people who this happened to, they're so traumatized that they can't even talk about it. So that today's Indians have no idea this happened. But the world needs to know that this happened. Not to get mad at the churches or the governments, but to learn from it so that we don't do it. To ourselves, to each other, to our own people. And I'll show you what I mean. Back in the late 1800s, when we were placed on reservations, there were prison camps in the beginning. And this is a situation where we couldn't leave, we were not allowed to hunt, our knives and guns were taken from us, and we're only allowed to eat whatever the American government gave to us, which was really no good food. The quality of the food was okay when it left places like Chicago and stuff like that, but once it got to, some of these train stations between there and the reservation, a lot of these handlers would sell it, and then they would buy old food and put that in there instead, and these middlemen would make a lot of money. Yeah. So what we got on a reservation was bullshit food. Yeah, it was really no good. And we ended up getting all kinds of diseases like heart diseases, hypertension, diabetes, things like that. And then at the same time, our language and ceremonies were declared illegal by the United States. So we were hit physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Soon after that, our minds became weak. And these, as I said earlier, these are the four parts of the self. So with the four parts of the self being sick, we lost our connection to our sacred center. So we started to focus on communicating away from that. And then the priests came from the various churches, and they learned our ways and said that since our ways conflict with the Bible, that our ways are evil, that they come from Satan. They come from the devil. So in our weakened states, we slowly began to accept that. Now, another thing is that there were some Lakota people that didn't want to accept that. They wanted to hang on to the traditional Lakota Star Knowledge ways. And if they revolted, they were sent to a mental hospital in Canton, South Dakota, which was set up for all reluctant Indians in America that did not want to become Christianized. They were sent there. And these church priests also committed the medicine men, medicine women, holy men, holy women. They committed all of them to these mental asylums too. This way, the people would not go to them for help, that they would come to the churches. They wanted the Indian people to only go to the priests and not their traditional healers. So they sent the healers to this mental asylum to die. And if you are radical, you were sent there to die too. Yeah. So while this is happening, the priests are saying to the Indian people, if you believe our way, we will help your children. And so, there was a very, very dire straits time. And so a lot of Indians became Christians because of that. Like I said, we were weak-minded too at that point. And those who stuck it out, there were people who refused to accept Christianity, but they went to church anyway. What they were doing was they were putting up a candy store front. On the outside, they were acting like good little Christian Indians, but on the inside, they weren't. They were Star Knowledge people. Yeah? They did this because they didn't want to get sent to that mental asylum to die. That's sad, isn't it? But that's part of what happened back then. And it's because of these people who maintained this knowledge in secret. Thanks to them, they passed it down, to certain people like me, and we still have this knowledge. And I have this show, and I'm sharing it with you. Because this regards the sacred center. And we all have that. Yeah, this is not a Lakota thing. This is a Ikche Oyate thing. Ikche Oyate means human being. When you live this way, as I said in the beginning, you communicate as a human, not as a Lakota, not as a German, or a Japanese, or an African. You communicate as a human. Yeah? That's really important to know. So, that's how it was back then. Yeah? Now remember I said that the priest said to the Indians, we will help your children. So, they took the children away from the parents, sent them to boarding school hundreds of miles away, where these children were tortured to speak only English and learn the civilized Christian way. If they spoke about home, they were tortured. These schools didn't do background checks in those days. Yeah, the pay was really low, so they got really no good teachers in these schools. A lot of these teachers were sadistic. They got sexual pleasure from torturing people. And here, this is like summer holiday camp for them. And the same thing for perverts. A lot of perverts now had their pick of the litter. And they could get away with it. That's what happened. A lot of these children were murdered. They were killed. They were raped. They were molested. And there's a lot of unmarked graves near these schools. Not all these children are accounted for. So, those who made it through, what they learned was whatever they saw. Because a lot of these children never went back home. They were told by the priests that their families had died and that there was nobody there. And that broke their hearts. This is why some of these children, they were so sad they couldn't eat. And they ended up starving themselves to death. And those who made it through, like I said, they didn't really survive because they were not able to process all these emotional traumas that they experienced. They didn't know how, because the only adults that were around them were these unhealthy, abusive people, teachers, dorm matrons, cooks, janitors, priests. They were all unhealthy to them. That's all they knew. They learned how to become victims, and they learned how to become abusers to those who they considered weaker than themselves. So they didn't really survive. A lot of these children that made it through these schools, they had a lot of traumas that they didn't know how to deal with because all they saw was abuse. That's what they learned. There was no adult healthy role models to emulate. And remember I said these children were told that their families were all dead. So they didn't go back during summer holiday. They just stayed at these schools and worked. So when they left these schools, they tried to live in mainstream America. Nobody accepted them. They would say, you're a heathen. You're a dirty Indian. So they couldn't even get jobs off the reservation. And when they went back to the reservation, to their people, they ran into more problems. Many, many times they were not even accepted by their own people because their own people were saying, you're too white. You act like a white man. So they're caught in between. So a lot of them turned to alcohol to try to hide all of it, to try to forget everything. They turned to alcohol and then later drugs. There were some who tried to make it. They married each other because they knew each other went through the same thing. And they didn't want their children to go through what they went through. So they didn't teach them the language. They didn't teach them the culture. Those children, the children of these first generation boarding school people, those children are today's elders. When they were born, they didn't learn the language. They didn't learn Lakota Star knowledge. They never got the opportunity to. When you look at an old person on the reservation today, they're not the connection to the ancient past. No, they were born in a Christian background at a time when the reservations were strongly Christian. So this is what happened. That's a native experience that a lot of people don't realize. This is what happened all over America and Canada too. So the next generation, they are sent to boarding school too. No choice. It's a little bit better, but they're still abused. They're still getting treated really no good. And so they grow up, have children, and they don't teach their children anything. What can they teach them? They don't know anything concerning their own language. This is why today most people cannot speak their own language, and what little cultural information they know is Christianized, meaning it's dualistic, and it's not the original ancient form. Okay, so the first generation of Indian kids that were sent to boarding school, since all around them were unhealthy adults who did nothing but abuse them, they didn't receive healthy parenting. They missed things that they should have learned about life. So they're lacking emotional development. So when they grow up, and those who make it through these boarding schools and then they have children, those children are also lacking that emotional support, that emotional development, because the parents don't know how to do it. Yeah, all they knew and all they learned was abuse. All they experienced in these schools was abuse. So they have a hard time trying to be a healthy parent. So they do the best that they can. But the children still are not receiving the proper emotional development, the experiences that healthy children should receive from healthy parents. They're still missing that. And so when that second generation grows up, they know even less concerning healthy parenting. And so their children receive even less. And every time this happens, the next generation becomes more dualistic than the previous one. So let me try to say that again. The first generation boarding school kids, they didn't receive proper parenting skills. So when they have children, their children are not receiving healthy training that they should be receiving. They're receiving even less than their parents. Now that second generation, when they grow up, see, they know even less. So when they have children, those children are receiving even less, and it gets worse with each generation, which also means that the less healthy emotional development they receive, the more dualistic they become. So with each generation is more becoming emotionally underdeveloped, they're also becoming more dualistic. So today, it's a huge mess on the reservation. We're incredibly, as a whole, we're incredibly underdeveloped emotionally, and we are incredibly dualistic. We're quick to attack each other. We're quick to pull each other down. We're just like the rest of the civilized, dualistic world. Notice I didn't say white man, because this is all over the world. It's not just among white countries. It's all over the world. Wherever there is a dualistic ideology, where one gender is considered less than and property of the other gender, you're going to have incredibly underdeveloped emotional people, which equals incredibly dualistic people. And that is unhealthy. So that started by the time of the late 1800s on the reservation.
So that is some really important information. And yeah, that's really important stuff that I just was talking about there. Very serious information. And this is important to know because when we know where we've been, we can make better decisions on where we're going to go. Yeah, we can make healthier decisions on where we want to go from here. But we really should have clarity. We should have clarity of mind and emotional development, because without emotional development, we cannot have spiritual development. And it doesn't matter, concerning whether there's good people or bad people in duality. That's not the issue. The issue here is the idea of duality. That religion is a dualistic way. That's period. Yeah, that's just the way it is. And I know there's good people that are in churches and stuff like that. But it's like, it's not good enough, is what I'm saying, because it has to. They have to realize that they're in a dualistic way, and until that happens, the good things that they do, yes, they help people, yes, they take care of others, yes, they go out there and when nobody else would, they would go out there and help a stranger out and stuff. That's all admirable. But I truly believe that when somebody does something like that, it doesn't have anything to do with Christianity. It has everything to do with humanity. That's not being a Christian. That's being human. Yeah. So I think in moments like that, they're superseding or overcoming this Christian bondage, and so they make the mistake of saying that it's a Christian act that they're doing. Because seriously, a Christian act is duality. So when somebody, regardless of their religion or political background, that when they do something to help one another, to truly help another person, they are not doing it. They're stepping out of their cage that they locked themselves into with religion or political whatever. They actually stepped out of it, and they don't realize it. They think they're communicating as a Christian or as a Democrat or whatever, but I think they don't realize that they've really stepped out of it. And I think that's where they need to wake up. Is they need to realize that they're not being held by those bonds anymore when they do that. They don't realize that. So instead they say, well, no, I'm just doing a Christian act. And I don't think it is. I think it's a human act. But they don't realize that. So you see, good people in these kind of dualistic ideologies, a lot of times they step out of that cage and they're not even aware of it. But yet they'll turn around and say, no, that was the Christian thing to do. And no, it wasn't. Yeah? So this is a weird example, but it does show you that sometimes people who are in dualistic lifestyles, that sometimes they do things that are not dualistic and they're totally unaware of it. Yeah? So you see the potential. Yeah, there is potential here to do great things. Now we just have to wake them up. Yeah? So this is these are all important things, because this is a process that is a part of life, but the problem is it's in process. Duality is something that's in process. And what we have to do is complete that process. But that's the problem. Most of us are not doing that. Instead, we're living in that process and saying, well, this is our way of life. This is our religion. This is our political identity. Yeah? And that's like building half a house and saying, oh, it's done. Yeah, we'll just put a tarp over the roof and then we're done. That's duality. Duality is everywhere. The thing is, it's what our purpose is to learn what it is so we can complete it. Yeah, so that we can transform it into something healthy. And part of that process is eliminating religions. Taking a religious way of thinking and then completing it so it's not a religion anymore. You see what I mean? Because in duality, as I said earlier, people only see things as this and that. And usually it's this against that. And Lakota Star knowledge is this, that, and the other. And sometimes there's a bunch of others. And there's none of them are against each other. They're just different. It doesn't mean one's better than the other. They're just different. Some of those pieces we can learn from. Some of them just reaffirm what we already know. And some of them we're just at peace with. But we don't call anything good or bad. But we learn from it. Yeah, that's the difference between duality and Lakota Star knowledge. The American Indian Movement, they are an asshole organization. They're a really sad attempt at trying to be a mafia. These guys do not represent civil rights whatsoever. These guys terrorize their own people. And there's a lot of people support AIM, but they don't realize that the AIM leaders are very secretive, and they do a lot of they are responsible for a lot of murders on reservations, especially on Pine Ridge. they're trying to blame it on the FBI, but the evidence is coming forward now because some of the AIM leaders are dying, and so people are not scared anymore. And so now they're starting to talk, and they're telling what really happened, and what really happened is that the AIM was the one responsible. They are not a civil rights organization. They are a terrorist group. They stay on the reservation to make sure you don't talk, because if you talk, you disappear. So they make you disappear. And even during they did a siege in Wounded Knee in 1973, and even there, people who were there, they talk about how the AIM leaders were fighting amongst each other. They're jealous, because one's getting more attention in the media than the other, so they're kind of getting jealous of each other. They're getting paranoid of each other, and if they wanted to do something, and you disagreed with something that they wanted you to do, then you die. Yeah, there's several black civil rights people that went there to help. And when the AIM leaders were trying to get them to do something, they didn't want to do it because what the AIM people were asking them to do was kind of a bad thing. And so when they refused to do it, then they ordered the deaths of these black civil rights people. See? Do you see what I mean? This is not civil rights. This is a terror group. And a lot of people support them, and they're really misinformed. They don't have all the information, and so what they're supporting is a lie. Yeah, and like there's a person named Leonard Peltier who admits to killing these two FBI agents on the Pine Ridge Reservation in the 70s. He admits it. Yeah, and but people are saying there's no evidence to say he did it, but then he himself says he did it. Because there are people that I do know personally that have been in prison with this guy. Now, these are not my friends. I just know them, and I know they don't lie. Yeah, and he said this guy brags about it all the time. And whenever you see these on the internet, whenever you see these message from Leonard, or you see the video where somebody's reading a letter from Leonard Peltier, he didn't write it. Yeah, it's people are just making shit up like this. And the guy is a killer. He is a murderer. He is exactly where he needs to be. And they gave him 2 life sentences. Yeah. The thing is, see, here, let me bring this argument here that I said earlier. Here you have a man, an Indian man, who killed 2 FBI officers. I think at least one of them had a family. I don't know if the other one did, but they were both pleading for their lives. And the guy said, "Please, I have 2 kids. They're just babies." And Leonard laughed and shot them both, back of the head. Now, using my same argument, I think Leonard should have been executed long time ago, because American tax dollars are paying for Leonard's health care. They're paying for his, he has to be transported to different prisons all the time. He's always in movement. You don't always know where he's at, because people want to kill him, because he killed people. They want revenge on him. This is not a good guy. Yeah, and here you have these 2 families who were robbed of their sons and husbands, their fathers, and that left a hole in those 2 families' hearts. They will never have their father again. They will never have their son again. But yet, here's the murderer who's allowed to live and have 3 meals a day, and he has his health care, He gets eyeglasses, all paid for by United States citizens who pay taxes. Meanwhile, other people can't afford health care. But Leonard can get it because he killed 2 FBI agents. What's the logic behind that? They should have been executed too. He is guilty. Yeah? So see, when I say things like this, I get a lot of flack from AIM people too. And that goes to show you those people are not respectful. They, in the Lakota way, you respect your enemy. See, people don't understand the definition of respect. A lot of people think that respect means you do what I tell you to do, or you do what I say because I'm right. They think that's respect. That's not respect. That's oppression. Respect means you allow other people to think the way they want to think. You don't have to agree with it. As long as you don't step on each other's toes, you can still have peace. So AIM people are not this way. When I talk like this, I get a lot of shit from AIM people, and they're going to tell me to go to hell, and good thing you're over there. You know, I get threatened too. That goes to show you that they're not about peace. If you disagree with them, they threaten you. You see, that's not respect. That's terror. They try to terrorize me. It doesn't bother me, but they still try. Yeah, this goes to show you that this is not a good group. That's why I don't support them. They are a dualistic group. I explained to you earlier what duality is. This is really a good example that they are dualistic as hell. They oppress anybody who disagrees with them. And they like to take credit for things they've never done. They're liars. And whenever a leader goes to speak someplace, boy, he's going to brag himself up. That's one thing they really like to do, is brag themselves up. I did this, and I did that, and I did all of these things and all of those things. The only thing that's missing is, so you should bow down and kiss my feet. That's the only thing that's missing from what they're saying. Yeah. So this is a group of people. It's an organization run by a group of narcissists oppressing anybody. And the other thing is, people are not aware that when they were in their heyday in the 1970s, they passed women around like property. Because everybody was using this drug back then called angel dust, and I think it's PCP, but I forgot what that stands for. But in the 70s, they called it angel dust. It's a drug. I think it's similar to crystal meth in that once you start using it, you're basically dead. You can't get off angel dust. Once you've taken it, you're addicted. I know a girl from Cheyenne River. She's about 3-4 years older than me, and she was a really pretty girl. And she got caught up in this American Indian movement, so she was going around with them, to different parts of the United States. And after that Wounded Knee siege, and she came back to the reservation, she was off. She was crazy, and she was using this angel dust. She was messed up. She was really, really messed up. And I seen her at a powwow about 10 years ago, and she's like a little kid. Her mentality is like a little kid. And she has a son, and the son is like the adult. He has to police his mother. He's raising his mother. It's so sad to see that. And so this is what these guys were doing. The AIM guys were getting these girls on drugs and then passing them around to each other. This is no joke. This is the absolute truth. All this truth is coming out now. And what does that sound like to you? To me, it sounds a little bit like ISIS. And you hear the news reports of them, going someplace and kidnapping girls and and then selling them into sex slavery, and saying that they are not followers of the one true Allah, so they're considered less than human, and now they're property, and we can do whatever you want with them. So they're selling them to each other, and when they're done with them, they kill them. That sounds very similar to what the American Indian movement was doing in the 70s. So there's girls that don't want to admit that they were part of that sex ring. Yeah, here most Indian tribes traditionally they teach about respecting women. That women are the life givers, they're the life carriers. Yeah, that because of them the babies are, they have this special connection to the grandmother Earth and all these wonderful things. But those are standard Indian beliefs among many, many, many tribes. But yet this American Indian movement, they were getting these girls on drugs and then passing them to each other. Does that sound like respect to women? No, it doesn't. And if you disagree with them, they're going to call you a fag. They're going to call you a gay guy. Whereas most most Indian tribes view that as kind of a special thing. So that shows you these American Indian movement people, they don't even have knowledge of their own ways. None of them can speak their own language. And they're dualistic as hell. They see women as property. And then in public they'll say, yeah, we're matrilineal people. The women run the show. But then as soon as that camera is turned off, the guy, I heard a guy say this, an AIM guy on Pine Ridge. A really heavy-set guy. I mean, the guy is huge. I'm not going to say his name because I'm not going to promote him. But he is a convicted rapist. He raped 2 women. Served his time, came out of prison. Now he's talking about the sanctity of women. If that guy did that back in the warrior days, they would have executed him for that. You see, because we don't have real warrior societies today, assholes like American Indian movement are existing. See, a long time ago, our warrior societies, they took care of troublemakers right away. You got mouthy, they took you out and beat the crap out of you, and you say, better knock it off or next time we kill you. And either they shape up or they say, well, you're not Lakota anymore. You say, leave. You're an enemy now. Go live with the enemy. Learn their language. That happened a lot. Because you cannot have a troublemaker in the village, because they will do something to endanger the entire camp. And we cannot have that. So unless he's raped somebody or molested a child or whatever, he's just banished. Yeah? And if he has raped somebody, then he's killed. That's how they dealt with it back in the day. Very serious things. Yeah? So if we had those kind of warriors today, the American Indian movement would have never developed. They would have put them down fast. And if those warriors could come back to life today, I guarantee you 100% one of the first things they're going to do is wipe out the American Indian movement. They're going to eliminate all of them because they're not doing anything to benefit the people. I guarantee you 100% If Sitting Bull were able to come back, that's the first thing he would do. You see, he would have he would wipe out these AIM leaders today. And if Russell Means was still alive, that's probably the first one he would eliminate. Because those guys are troublemakers, and they only care about themselves. Yeah. So this is a terrorist group. They split the people apart. That's not what Lakota means. Yeah, Lakota means you can disagree with each other. As long as you don't force your ideas down each other's throats, you can still disagree and have peace. That's what it means to be Lakota. But when you say, hey, you don't agree with me, so you're the enemy, you're gay, yeah, you're an asshole, I'm going to kill you. That's not respect. That's oppression. And that is absolutely not Lakota. See? That's why I don't consider the American Indian Movement a real organization of Native people. This is an organization of troublemakers. Yeah? Now, there might be some nice people in there, but it's just like any other religion. They need to wake up and get the hell out of there before it's too late for them. Remember, wherever you go, you're going to find good people and bad people. And when it's in a religion, we need to wake up those good people, yeah, so that they realize that is a duality that they're living in, so they can get out of there and become more of a blessing that they were intended to be.